welcome to the Land Pioneers podcast, where we speak with some of the leading minds shaping the future of land development and city shaping. In each episode, we uncover insights, experiences, and lessons behind people driving real change in their industry. And today I'm joined by Melinda Holloway from Urban Design Management Group. Melinda, welcome.
Thanks, Dan. It's nice to be here.
Sure thing. So Melinda is an urban designer, and this is kind of a follow-up session after we spoke with her colleague Shannon Hill a little while ago, who's an urban planner. So I really want to talk about in this episode between the differences of the two and also bring you a perspective of the current planning environment for an urban designer rather than a planner. So Melinda is an urban designer with over 25 years of experience shaping communities through planning and design. She's held senior leadership roles at Urban Design Management and SMEC, where she's led major urban design projects and guided teams on really complex situations. So she has strong ties with developers and government, earning a reputation for efficiently guiding projects from concept to approval, and her work in subdivision and precinct planning has really shaped practical and well-established communities. So I'm really excited to hear from Melinda and her expertise in urban design and what actually shapes some of the land development projects we admire across Australia, and more specifically Victoria, I guess. But look, before we get started, just a little bit about Eagle Vision. We're the sponsors of the Land Pioneers podcast, and we've been involved in 3D visualization for nearly 18 years and delivered close to 745 projects, including large-scale land estates, major precincts and greenfield communities across Australia. Large-scale building and development teams often work with us because our visuals are built to support big-picture master plan decisions, interactive master plans, precinct frameworks, and effective marketing collateral to communicate the functional elements of proposed land communities, not just creating pretty presentations. And with teams in Australia and Europe, work continues around the clock to keep large, complex projects moving along. We're very open with how we work, giving builders and developers clear visibility over progress and detail with no surprises. And that clarity and visibility is why Eagle Vision is trusted on complex, large-scale subdivision projects. Now, back to our guest, Melinda Holloway. So, Mel, let's start with this. Could you talk about the main points of difference between urban planning and urban design?
Well, they're very, very much interrelated, Stan, as you would appreciate. But I think the way I sort of see it is we have a planning framework within which we work, and an urban designer has to interpret that planning framework and design how those places that the words of the planning framework might say are going to be created. So I guess we get to do the fun stuff in the drawing and the design.
Okay, so is it kind of like the urban design is a bit more of a helicopter view, whereas planning has to work more with the frameworks that are set up?
It can be. Urban design can be quite broad. I guess from my experience, we can be working on a small site at a very small and detailed scale. But then we can also be looking at it, as you say, from a helicopter view and doing that broad scale master planning of particularly new communities and that working with the planners in that broader scale precinct planning. So, yeah.
So, all right, that's great. So let's take you back to the beginning. So how did your sort of journey start into this whole sort of industry?
Yeah, I was probably one of those kids at school who didn't really know what I wanted to do. It was a bit, didn't know what pathway it was. And I remember my careers advisor saying to me, you'll get the marks, you could go and be an architect. And I thought, yeah, okay, that sounds interesting. But I was always more interested in the areas around buildings, more so than the actual design of the buildings. And I think that's probably what led me into off to uni and doing a degree that was, initially I was going to do landscape architecture. And I sort of tossed around a few ideas. I did a degree at Melbourne Uni, and at the time it was quite broad. It had, it was a planning and design. It was a Bachelor of Planning and Design. So it gave me the option to sort of follow that planning pathway, landscape architecture, but ended up, I remember doing it was a group project in third year uni. and we had to master plan a community. And that's basically what led me into doing what I do now.
Fantastic. Look, earlier on, you sort of mentioned that you spent like nearly 2 years over in Indonesia. Did that at all influence you in terms of your pathway and career and professional development?
Possibly, yeah. Yeah, I spent a couple of years over there as, when I was sort of in high school. My father was working on he was a civil engineer working on a major river project over there, rehabilitation project. So I think probably that experience of seeing how different places come together and how they work, I probably did influence that. I always had a keen interest and still do in geography and also really had that love of drawing and creating things. So I think that's probably some of those things all came together to lead me to where I ended up.
Fascinating. And culturally, did you sort of feel any kind of parallels to what was happening? Because in parts of Indonesia, quite raw and rural, whereas obviously Victoria is far more developed. So how did that kind of influence your thinking?
Yeah, I think, travelling through, we lived in Sumatra, sort of in the northernmost sort of islands of Indonesia, and to see the way, I guess the way, particularly in that sort of Asian context, cities have developed over time in comparison to the way we do it in Australia. I think that piqued a keen interest. I mean, obviously the services we have here, the structure of the way we do things is very different to the way that works in other countries. So I think, yeah, definitely I came to appreciate some of the things we have here.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, on a bit of a sidetrack, last year I think it was, when we travelled through Bali a bit, it feels like it's organised chaos.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's kind of like there are barely any street traffic lights, but the traffic just seems to flow and merge and do whatever it needs to do.
Yeah.
Did you have the same experience in Sumatra?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, the way, and I don't know whether it's a cultural thing, but everything seems to work. And it doesn't have the regulation and the structure that maybe we have in Australian cities. But, you can go, I've travelled in other Asian countries like Vietnam, Ho Chi Minh City's a great example. Like, the way traffic and people move through that city without a lot of order is a really fascinating example of the way cities work and the way different planning works, I guess.
Yeah.
Or lack of sort of planning.
Yeah, like it doesn't seem like there's an overriding structure, but underneath it seems fairly organic. Yeah,
it does. And I think we could learn some lessons from that, definitely. I think sometimes the way we plan and design places is very regimented and controlled, and I think you could also let people lead that in the way they use their spaces and their cities. I think that's something that you can see in some of those other cities, particularly in the likes of Indonesia. You really do see it from a different context over there.
Yeah, and then how do you draw sort of parallels to what you're doing in your work today?
I think probably just keeping in the back of the mind that the way we plan is the way we think things should happen. So, we've, obviously studying and then working for a long time in the industry, you do get used to that's the way you do things, or that's what
how we used to do things, right?
How we used to do things, or how we should do things. I think bringing it back to thinking about how people use spaces and how people use their cities is probably the key to making sure we do come up with good new communities.
Yeah. I've heard that some of the designers, in terms of actually spaces, intentionally design things in such a way where people bump into each other. Have you come across this concept?
Yeah, I have.
Spur on conversations?
Yeah, and I think that is something we talk about, particularly in relation to how we look at activity centres and trying to move away from that kind of mall-based centre and coming back to some of those where you might have a narrower pavement. So you are getting people to cross it and integrate.
Interact, right?
Yeah, and interact, yeah, more so than just separating. You know, we tend to separate people from cars, from bikes, from, got e-scooters and mobility scooters and all these kind of things, giving them all a safe space to travel, but we also want them to interact.
Yeah. There's no safe space in Bali.
No, there's certainly not. No, you have to find that yourself. Yeah. Navigate it.
Yeah, cool. All right, so now let's come to the current planning policy. What are sort of the challenges that you're finding in the current environment, and how the planning is impacting maybe your way you design?
Yeah, there's been a lot of change in the Victorian planning space lately over the past 12 to 18 months. It is changing the way we think about, I guess, our particular cities. So, we did a lot of work around Melbourne and regional towns as well. So I think there's been a large focus on, obviously that 70-30 split of trying to encourage infill development and create homes for people who need them in some very attractive places. And we've also still dealing with greenfield development as well. I think one of the interesting things I find is that from the point of view of looking at regional cities and regional towns, we probably need to shift the focus a little bit there and think about how some of these policies are influencing those towns as well. There's a lot of good stuff coming out of the planning system in Victoria that's going to, see the benefits over the next few years, from what I can see.
Right. And is it to do with sustainability, or is it something else specifically?
I think there's a few things. Certainly, utilising and trying to maximise development in areas that are well serviced, I think is, fundamentally from a planning perspective is good strategic policy. I think there's some really good things about tree canopy and trying to improve urban greening, particularly in not just, our existing suburbs, but also our new developments. So I think there's some really good things around sustainability there that we can start to see flow through into the way we do things. There's also a lot of challenges. I mean, infrastructure delivery is a huge one in Victoria, and I'm sure it is in other states too. But just the infrastructure keeping up with development is probably the biggest challenge that I see for the industry.
Is it power or is it water? Which bits are sort of more?
It's probably, look, fine with most projects. Look, they normally have, planning a new community, you normally have an issue, whether it's drainage outfall, whether it's sewer or water infrastructure being available, or whether it's just major road infrastructure being ready for development. So, there are areas that we've got projects where we are reliant on major state infrastructure to actually get housing on the ground and get these master planned communities happening. So I think there's a real combination of infrastructure sort of delivery issues that need to be worked through from a developer's perspective with government, and that might be local and state government and agencies. So it can get quite complex. It's not just about master planning community. There's a lot that goes into that.
Yeah, interesting. So let's talk about the sustainability side of things. So what is the future? What do you see sort of coming through? You mentioned tree canopy and greening things further. Is there anything beyond?
I'm sure there is. I guess we see little bits filtering through all the time. I guess, you come up with, for instance, in a lot of the developments we're looking at, climate change considerations coming into the way we design drainage systems. That influences how much land you might need to accommodate that. You've got other things like just, changes to building codes and 7-star, that kind of thing that's, it keeps lifting the bar. I guess the other thing, not just sustainability, but also the impacts of things like considering bushfire risk, flooding, particularly in development planning, and the way that's changed maybe over the last 10 to 15 years in particular. There's a lot, and rightly so, a lot more consideration of the impacts of bushfire risk and planning for that appropriately, particularly when we're looking at new communities.
So what do you do to plan ahead for that within the urban design sort of space for bushfires?
Yeah, well, there's, looking at more recent, say, precinct structure plans that are being done, bushfire assessments are at the heart of that these days. I think, 10, 15 years ago they weren't. Perimeter roads, so around your development, so having a road, like if you've got a bottle to a creek or an open space, making sure there's a road. Previously you might have seen some, particularly townhouses overlooking that space. Setbacks now might be larger to try and manage that bushfire risk, so it does influence the way you design. Particularly from a grassland or forest perspective, there's different setbacks required for that. So integrating that into a master plan design is much more at the forefront than it probably was a few years ago. So that's one thing.
Yep. And what about activating sort of those living spaces? So you've got townhouses often they have driveways or garages facing the street.
Yep.
Are you noticing much where there's a laneway now being put behind it? So it's all living space facing the street, and whatever parking is accessed by the back. Yeah,
there's particularly, I think, lot sizes have got smaller in general across,
the cost of land has gone up. So
cost of land has gone up, lot sizes have got smaller. We've got things such as the Small Lot Housing Code here in Victoria, which, guides development on lots less than 300 square metres. So we see a real demand for those smaller lots in these new communities. The way those are delivered is a challenge, because we do have, delivering, from a developer's perspective, delivering a road at the front and a laneway at the rear is additional cost. But from an urban design perspective, you are getting a greater streetscape benefit by having rear-loaded lots, and you do get the opportunities for little studio apartments on the top of a garage and that kind of thing, which can provide for housing diversity. So we see a lot of, I guess, smaller fronted lots. So you might have...
So they're narrower?
They're narrower. So you have a lesser... you still got if you've got a garage at the front, half your lot's taken up by a driveway access. Can you fit a street tree in front of that? Can you fit on-street car parking? Can you also fit another tree in the front of your dwelling to try and add to that tree canopy coverage in a streetscape? So there's a real balance between trying to achieve all of these objectives for smaller lots and also making it still cost effective to deliver and getting those sustainability outcomes you want with green space, but achieving a good energy ratings, achieving a good density. So there's a lot of factors flowing into that, and we see the challenge coming back from councils. The challenge with these smaller fronted lots is actually fitting everything in and making sure that those trees are going to grow and are going to be there in the longer term when you haven't got much space for planting. So I think there's a lot of competing interests when it comes to that level of detail.
Yeah, interesting. And how about this? So with obviously the cost of housing and cost of construction haven't gone up, are you seeing any developers planning for multi-family sort of dwellings within new projects?
Interestingly, we've got a couple of projects at the moment where we're adjusting a master plan and that's to accommodate some larger lot sizes, and then but overall from a yield perspective, we're going to probably stay about the same. So we're also creating some smaller lots, but we also are creating some larger lots that give flexibility for either at that multi-generational family home, or someone might come along and build 2 dwellings and subdivide later. So it gives that flexibility. So they're thinking a little bit outside the square to say, well, rather than just carving up, the standard 12.5, 14 metre, 16 metre, 10.5 metre wide lots along the street, giving a little bit more diversity that might allow that. Now, whether that works from a land cost perspective, still to be seen. But yeah, I'm seeing that a little bit coming through.
Yeah, because developers don't really control what the builders will build on the lot, right?
No, they can only control it. Yeah, that's right. And the only way they can control it is by design guidelines and things like that, that come along with particularly some of the master plan communities. But yeah, still, it does give a bit of flexibility to being how you actually deliver housing.
Yeah, as long as we can move away from, the McMansions kind of.
Yeah, well, this is the thing, like you might provide a larger lot which does attract, that very large single dwelling, but maybe that is for a multi-generational family. There's, I guess, some of the changes to the planning system here too have made it easier to build 2 dwellings on a lot. So I think that's probably making them think a little bit more, okay, well, if we can go through a streamlined deemed to comply process to get 2 dwellings on a lot, well, maybe that makes it more attractive to a purchaser.
Yeah, interesting. All right. So now there's obviously policy and implementation. Are you seeing much in the way of, okay, they've created this theory, but it actually doesn't work in practice, or is it working out?
Yeah, it's early days still with the major changes to things like the mid-rise housing code and the changes to the single dwelling, the 2 dwellings on a lot kind of provisions in the Victorian, the deemed to comply. It's early days. We're seeing, from our perspective, we're seeing a little bit of it, particularly in the more 2 dwellings on a lot kind of, process coming through. I haven't seen a lot myself in the mid-rise code. We've got a couple of clients who are starting to look at that, but I think there is still that pressure. I bet from our point of view, where we'd be dealing with is mainly in greenfield, and there's still that underlying issue of the cost, which is, I've seen some clients sort of plan for it, but the cost has come back and said, well, it's not going to stack up for us. So, yeah, I think it's early days.
But cost is the major factor. Like the other things are great, but really you've got to make the thing viable.
Yeah, the principles and the cost are all good, but if it doesn't stack up, it doesn't stack up.
Interesting. All right, look, and now finally, one question for you. So you've mentioned that you're a bit of an avid hiker. What hike are you planning next?
That's a very good question. Still thinking about the next one, but just completed the 3 Capes track in Tasmania earlier this year, which was an absolute ripper of a hike. I would highly recommend it to anyone, and great for someone who's not the camping type. The huts are amazing. I'd really like to do some walking in New Zealand. I haven't been across there to actually do some hikes yet, but that's definitely on my high priority list.
What were some of the highlights from the 3 Capes?
Oh, well, I did it with 10 girls, well, there were 10 of us together. We loved the huts, we loved the company, the other people on the trip, and we had magical weather, and the swim at the end in the freezing cold Tasmanian water was definitely a highlight for me. But the scenery was just magic. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Amazing. Look, Melinda, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story. And to everyone listening, this is the Land Pioneers podcast, bringing you real conversations with people shaping the future of land development. And if you got values from today's episode, please rate, share, and hit subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. We'll see you in the next one.